Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are taking a deep dive into a completely new way of looking at hypnosis. And I mean, forget everything you think you know from movies or stage shows. We're about to explore a new science of the mind, one that's all about structure and, believe it or not, engineering. So, let's just kick things off with a question that honestly is designed to shake things up a bit. What if the central pillar of hypnosis, this idea of suggestion, isn't actually the cause of anything? What if it's just been a handy label we've been using, a placeholder for something much, much more real and measurable?
You know, to really get why this new idea is such a big deal, we first have to talk about the old one, the story we've been telling ourselves about hypnosis for, gosh, over 100 years. Let's pull back the curtain on its foundational myth.
For decades, the entire field has been built around these words you see right here. Suggestion, rapport, technique. They sound right, don't they? But the material we're digging into today makes a really bold claim. These are not causes. Nope, they're just descriptions we use after the fact. They're stories we tell to explain something that's already happened.
Okay, this slide right here, this is the heart of it. Suggestion is this fuzzy, tangled mess of an idea that, when you really look at it, doesn't explain much of anything. But structure? That's a clear, mechanical process. The argument is simple, but it is absolutely profound. Suggestion is the myth. Structure is the reality.
All right, so how do we actually prove this? Well, let's tear down the old model, piece by piece, by putting it right next to the new one. You're about to see how these familiar, kind of vague ideas get replaced by concrete structural mechanisms.
Okay, first up, rapport. We all know what that feels like, right? That magical connection. But what if it's not magic at all? What if it's more like two tuning forks starting to vibrate at the exact same frequency? The structural model calls this field coherence, the measurable syncing up of two minds. That feeling of trust we call rapport, that's just the side effect of this much deeper physical alignment.
And how about suggestibility? The old way of thinking is that, it's just a personality trait. Some people are good subjects, some people aren't. Well, this new model says that's just plain wrong. Instead, it gives us structural responsiveness. See, it's not about who you are, it's about the unique architecture of your mind. Think of it like a bridge. You don't ask if it's a suggestible bridge, you ask how its specific design responds when you apply a very specific, controlled force. So, what about all the scripts and special hypnotic words, the famous inductions? Well, the argument here is that they aren't the cause of anything, they're just the delivery system. The real active ingredient is something called cognitive load. Think of it like a syringe. The needle itself isn't the medicine, right? It's just the tool that delivers it. In hypnosis, the words are the syringe. The load is the actual medicine.
So to really get our heads around this, we're going to need some new words. A whole new vocabulary, actually. This new model sees the mind, not as some mysterious black box, but as a cognitive architecture with specific, knowable properties. So, let's learn the language.
First up is load. You can think of this as the engine for the entire process. It's a very specific, targeted pressure put on the mind. It could be the mental strain of trying to hold a long string of numbers in your head or focusing every bit of your attention on a tiny sensation. It's the force that's deliberately introduced to the system to, force it to adapt.
Next, we have topology. This is a cool one. Imagine your mind is a giant, bustling city with thousands and thousands of streets. Topology is the complete map of all those available streets. The hypnotic process, then, works by temporarily closing down almost all of those roads and funneling all of the mental traffic down one single focused highway. That's what topological narrowing is.
And finally, there's coherence. This is basically the mind's internal stability, its integrity. The best analogy is the tension on a guitar string. To change the note, you have to adjust the tension. But if you loosen it too much, it just flops around and makes no sound at all. Coherence has to be carefully managed. You relax it just enough to allow for a change, but you keep it just taut enough so the whole system stays intact. It's a really delicate balancing act.
Okay, so we've got these new pieces: load, topology, and coherence. What happens when you put them all together? Well, you don't get some vague, mysterious art form. You get a clear, step-by-step mechanical process. This isn't about belief or magic, it's about cognitive physics.
And this right here, this is the map of how it all works. It's the whole sequence. You start by introducing load, which forces the mind to narrow its focus. That's step 2, topological narrowing. As the system hones in, its internal stability gets carefully adjusted. That's coherence modulation. And this process just keeps going down the list, each step triggering the next one, just like a line of dominoes falling. It all leads to this incredible final step called behavioral inevitability, an outcome that isn't suggested but is structurally guaranteed. Because, well, it's the only path the mind has left to take.
I absolutely love this quote from the source material. Using suggestion as a mechanism is like describing a bridge collapse as the structure felt like falling. It is poetic, not scientific. I mean, wow. That just perfectly nails the entire shift in thinking, doesn't it? We're leaving behind folklore and pretty metaphors, and we're moving into the world of engineering and physics.
But you might be asking, okay, so why does changing a few words really matter? This isn't just some academic squabble. Moving from a fuzzy, suggestion-based model to a clear, structural one has massive real-world consequences. This table really says it all. Just look at the difference here. It's night and day. With the structural model, predictability goes from low to high. Safety goes from unpredictable to bounded and controlled. We literally go from unmeasurable folklore to measurable engineering. This isn't just an improvement, it turns a fuzzy art into a stable, repeatable science. And here is where things start to feel like science fiction. You can't program a computer with a fuzzy concept like rapport or imagination. Those are human metaphors, but you can absolutely code things like load, topology, and thresholds. And that's why this structural model is already being used to simulate hypnosis in synthetic minds, something that would be completely and totally impossible with the old model. And so we find ourselves at the end of an era. The idea of suggestion was useful, it was a good placeholder, a story we told ourselves when we couldn't see the actual blueprints of the mind. But as this slide says so clearly, we're closing that old storybook. The age of suggestion is over. The age of structure is just beginning. And that leaves us with one final, and I think pretty fascinating question to think about. If a human experience as complex and mysterious as hypnosis can be broken down and understood as a predictable architectural process, what else about our minds, our choices, our very feelings might not be what it seems?